Okay, hi. Today I just got a couple things to get organized here. Sorry. Okay, and yeah. So today I'm talking about horoscopes for the 21st century, and really I'm talking about the evolution of chart forms and not the transits for the century. I'm talking about the type of chart forms that can be used and the amount of information that can be gained. So yeah, it's we've seen a lot of the charts in the last few weeks that I use, and so I just thought I'd better take some time to explain them. See, in the last century, 50 years ago, well, 50, yeah, in the 50s and 60s, American Astrology and the magazines, they were using these type of blank chart forms. Like just on the left, they had the 12 houses you put, and everything's put in the houses, and you just had to figure everything else in your head from that. And then it evolved with this second form on the right here. You could see you'd put the natal, the houses are there, you put your planets in the houses, and then you could put the transits or the transits around the outside, or the progressions around the outside. Then these are some other forms that evolved to make it a little bit better from that, when you had the houses. But generally the houses were put in 12 divisions on a wheel, and everything was memorized what the houses meant, and then everything happened in those houses. Anything there, a sign, a planet, anything that happened there would relate to things in those houses. That's still a big part of astrology today. And here there's an aspectarian on it and some of the planet positions. This is another the fourth chart on the right hand side. Again, it has the houses on it, divided into houses, made a little more graphic, like a flower, and had a position to put the house, you can put the house cusps, the degree of the house cusps on it, around it, and the aspectarians down below. So this was kind of a standard format, certainly for the first half of the 20th century, and then even into the 60s. These charts, it wasn't until about the 70s it started to change. 60s and the late 60s and the 70s that some of the chart forms started to take a different jump. But these are, but down the bottom are some filled in charts. This is just as the ascendant below, the midheaven above, puts the date and the time in the middle, and puts the planets and the degrees they're in and the houses they're in. That was it. From that, you had to calculate your charts and calculate the aspects, or have them written out. And it's a very cerebral process, and you had to be thinking all the time. It would be easy to miss an aspect just by having to calculate just off the top as you're talking to someone. But this was what was done. It was there weren't great, like, the technology and what was available, and like, it was a different time. This chart was done in 1836. Well, it was done for 1836, but this was these type of charts. As you go back further and further, you'll see these type of chart forms as the bottom left-hand corner here. Then different ones came in. Here's another adapted one, which has the houses put in like petals, and they had a symbol in the front, and they put the degrees of the house cusps around the edge. Still, basically, the idea you're putting the planets in the house, so you know it, and you put the degree and the sign of the planet, or the signs on the house cusps. So you have brought the signs in as an extra factor. Then, again, the next chart, same thing, just a little bit more matter of fact, just straight 12 houses with a circle in the middle for the data, and a second circle for the house cusps, or signs on the house cusps. Okay, so this was basically how it was done. It was enough. That was how associations were. It wasn't much more. It made it difficult to more detailed things, but for the general basic astrology, it had the basics right there. The chart on the right is a Vedic or Indian horoscope. There's several different kinds, but they're generally drawn. This is one where you see a square within a square, and you have the sections divided off, and they count kind of from the top down, first house, second house, third house, fourth, and they move around, and the planets are put in degrees and the minutes and the signs are in the red, and they're interpreted from there. And the birth data is put, I'm not sure what they put in the front here. They have the birth date down at the bottom. They have some other information up above. So these were some of the earlier chart forms. Just this type of chart form on the right and the bottom is still very common in India, in the Vedic system. Vedic system, it goes back a lot of years, thousands of years, and it's still, they didn't have the greatest of feminists, but they had their charts, and they would get their increase stuff by doing a chart, then twisting it and doing it. If you're concerned about something with the fifth house, and they do a second chart using the first house as the fifth house as the first house, and they get 2 or 3 layers of charts. And if something was good on all 3 levels, it was really good. If something was bad on all 3 levels, it was really bad. And that was, then the other techniques got more and more added in, and it evolved. It's Vedic was really dealing more with, involved a lot of dealing with the stars, but on a basic level. And this chart was just planets and houses, didn't have the stars. You'd have to know those or remember those in your head. Okay, then, as these are some computer ones, but between the 70s and the end of the century, people started to make, this is one where you put the planets in and you draw the aspects in, so you start to see the aspects of the planets are in the houses. And this one, the signs are put around, the signs are put evenly around the chart, 30 degrees each, and the houses are made to look different sizes for the actual degrees they were in. So this was a big addition, or a big advancement in the horoscope, because it allowed you to draw the aspects between the planets, and they would be in the right proportions to the signs they're in. A square would look like a square or triangle, whereas within the previous charts, you couldn't draw them in, because if you drew them in, they would, a triangle could be a square just by putting the way it was drawn, just hand drawn in. You had to mentally work the numbers and see the planets and figure it out in your head, one planet at a time as you were talking about it. But this one puts the signs of the zodiac in with the 360 degrees and then draws the house cusps in, so you didn't have to write in the degree all the time. Some people still did, but you didn't have to. You could see the different sizes of the houses. You could see where the planets are, and you could draw the aspects to it. So this was the next stage. Then it built up to, this is another one. These are, now we're getting into sort of computer ones that were done 70s and 80s, the 80s and 90s, I mean. There weren't home computers before 77, 76, 77. That was the first home computers that came out, and astrology forms were very simple at that beginning point. Then they began to evolve. So this was one where actually 12 houses. The 12 houses are put in equally, and the house cusps are put in, and the planets are put in where they are, but in the center, some of the aspects can be drawn. So there's still a distortion in this way by having the houses always equal. You don't see the actual sizes of them and the differences of them. So then this was the next stage of charts. This was Windstar chart, but a Euro wheel style. On the left-hand side, this is the printout. It has the signs of the zodiac with the actual degrees put in, and every 5 degrees is marked a little bit longer line, so it's easier to read. And you can see, automatically pretty well see the degree of planets in, or at least the 5, you see the sign. But the signs are put in strongly, and there's colors set for each of the signs. Yeah, that was an option. The ascendant and the midheaven is drawn in with the little dark knobs on it, or dark arrows on it to show the 4 angles. And they're not always square each other. In fact, the midheaven is basically the constant in the house, the point right overhead going due south and north. That the zenith is on that line. That's the basic midheaven. And the ascendant can be any, depending, because we're not right at the equator, it's not all set. It tends to move up or down and make the houses different. So to me, this was something that was a really good big addition, because it allowed you to work with the transits going through houses at different sites. So this chart, Carl Jung's chart, if you were looking around the transits, you can see right away this huge first house, Aquarius and most of Pisces. And a transit of Saturn would go through that house in about 5 years. But if you look at the 10th house of his career, it's only like a half a sign to go through that in a year and a half. Huge differences. When you have different sides, the transits going through the houses would make differences. And so there's all kinds of different techniques and different ways there's 20 different kinds of house systems. There's the signs is like tropical, but then there's sidereal zodiacs. So there's you, and in sidereal zodiacs, there's 10 or 20 different kinds of sidereal zodiacs. That's different starting points. So there's so many systems. It was never already all together. They would just depend on the individual astrologer or school that you were aligned to. This chart on the right, it's the same as the Euro wheel chart, but I touch it up a little bit. I use Photoshop to touch it up a little bit. And I'm just checking here. I used the Photoshop to touch it up a little bit. And so I drew the houses. I drew it in so you could see the divisions of the signs easier. I drew the line right across for your sun and midheaven, and I shaded in the part below the horizon. And I draw the squares in this red. So here on the one chart, you can see the aspects I put there with the symbols on it. It's still a maze to read through, but you can do it when it's easier than what was before. And in my classes and in teaching, I usually like to highlight the main aspects, but here the reds are the squares and oppositions, the blues are the trines, the greens are the sextiles, the broken lines are minor aspects. And this was Carl Jung's chart put in. So this is this was available in the 90s, and I worked with those through that. But during this same time period, I had my own chart forms. I had defined one where the signs of the zodiac were colored, and each sign had its own color, which we talked about. That's the color for the signs. There's a circle for each planet. So like here, the moon would be in Taurus, and the Taurus is the red-orange, looks orange there, but it's red-orange, and you see the red-orange circle around the chart and around the Earth. Then you see two little circle lines that are both an amber color. That would be his Mercury and Venus. In Cancer, so there'd be a circle for Mercury, a circle for Venus in Cancer. And then the wider circle is yellow. That's the sun in Leo. Side that now, as you go out, there's a blue, a green, and a purple circle. Each circle represents a planet. Mars was in Sag in blue. You follow the blue around, you see the blue sign. Mars comes in. Then the green was the Saturn here in Libra. You see the green circle, and the purple. No, the green was the Jupiter in Libra, and the Saturn was in Aquarius. So you have the three. So inside you see the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun circles. Then you have the Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Then you had the three circles for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're thinner in their outermost circle. We had the yellow circle for Uranus. We have and in this chart, Neptune and Pluto are both in Taurus, so they have the red-orange for the Taurus. So this was a mandala that was made to present the chart. The Earth was put in the center, and on this chart, it had the North Pole there, and you can see that the sun was over the North Pole. You can see this was a summertime chart. Well, these charts I evolved to that I could turn the Earth to have the actual place right on it, and you can see where the North Pole was in, and you can see it in different perspectives. But these were all hand drawn. The form was printed, but they were hand drawn. I get the chart printed out, or I hand calculate it 72. Hand calculate it, and then draw them in. I put the planets in the form, and then once the planets were in the form, I would get the colors, and I would color in the signs, then color in the mandala, then color in the aspects.